up, release, height, 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 skip. Hey guys, thanks for purchasing this Pinan Shodan Mastery DVD. So we're gonna break it down into solo drills, partner drills, kata applications, sparring with Pinan Shodan, and then actually we're gonna finish off with a discussion of how it kind of molds to you. So we're gonna talk about how Pinan Shodan fits into my karate and then how it fits into Aaron's karate as well. So before we begin, we actually want to talk about the overarching themes that we see in Pinan Shodan. As you saw in our demonstration, there's a lot of movements like this, there's a movement like this, there's even things like this. So these are all what we call structures or frames of the human body, using your anatomical structure to hold yourself up or to push against a resisting a force, right, or your opponents. Another thing that happened was twisting and turning, facing one way and turning the other way. So anytime that happens in a kata, most likely it's a throw, and we'll talk about that later. And also, there's one movement in the kata where you're twisting downward. So it talks about pivoting your feet as a way to shift your body weights in different directions.
All right, so some of the things that we like to do to help with forming the structures that we use during Pinan Shodan is various types of planks, specifically planks that we then kind of push up into, right? So what I'm going to show you here, this is a regular plank this way, but from here we're also going to push up into this position, right? We're going to hold that, and we're going to drop back down, and then we're going to push up back into here. Another way to do this is to form this kind of a triangular shape with your arms, and do the same thing. And push up, and then come back down, and then push up, and then come back down. So you can vary that, the rep scheme, and hold as long as you want. Usually when we do holds, we do the holds for anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds at the max. And then the rep scheme is usually about like 10 to 12 reps. You know, for no more than like 3 sets, because really what we're trying to do is just reinforce using those structures during a combative sense. That's all we're doing that for. We're not really using this as a form of a workout, right? It's just to help develop that structural thing. One last one that we'll also do here and there is kind of like a modified downward dog / headstand kind of a deal. And that's using the same thing as this structure here. And we're holding ourselves up like this, right? And this is just a pose and kind of a deal. So we're doing various types of poses of that nature. Other good ones are doing just regular side planks as well, right? So you can side plank this way, using your elbow as a support, your forearm, and that sort of thing. And you can practice switching to the center, and then coming back to the other side, and then back and forth, right? So if you can see, like, what we're actually mimicking here is this upwards rising block, right? Yeah, it's one of the things that you see. It's common in Pinan Shodan. It's also common in the beginning of the kata when we're doing this kind of a movement, right? It's all over the place. So that's where we're using these particular types of planks. Okay, so one of the real common movements that we find in this kata is the Shuto Uke. So I'll show you Shuto Uke. So it is to your benefit to practice this movement. So we're going to use it using bands. Now I say bands, this is obviously a bike tire. You can use whatever you have available. You don't have to spend money on bands if you don't have it. This simple movement is just basically he's pulling across with one hand, and then he's creating a frame structure with the other hand, right? You want to do both pushes, and then you want to also do pulls, you know? Kind of a deal. So the main thing that you're using is not necessarily your hand, which is what you might think in the kata, but you're using your forearm here, right? Hand is just to help you guide the rest of your body, right? Kind of a deal. So you do that with one arm, you switch, right? Inside and outside. And then from here, you can even practice doing a flow. You can go from the left to right, then back out, to the other arm, and back again, right? always pivoting. And then you want to also vary your stances like Michael's doing, right? You're not always standing in a cat stance. You want to flow between your stances, so your neck will out you to the front stance, to the back stance if you have to use a back stance in your katas or your forms, right? So, okay, so in the kata we have a movement that's like this kind of movement. So what we like to do to kind of train that a little bit is using a relatively light dumbbell. You're doing like kind of like a modified curl. So I'm actually going to stand with 1 foot forward, and I'm going to bring the curl across my body, and then squeeze and bring it just to where it's perpendicular to my body, right? So I'm going to bring it across and squeeze and bring it here. And this is just basically practicing creating this strong structure for me to be able to move and pivot around. The goal basically using it as like an arm drag or bracing it against the opponent, right? Is what we're kind of thinking when we're doing that. So all this is we're not using this as a muscular building tool. We're just using this as a way to practice framing this against our body and bringing something across and being able to hold it here, right? So you can go obviously start pretty light till you feel comfortable with that, and then you can go as heavy as you want. If you look at some videos online of people who do practice judo, some people will do kind of a swinging motion with these. I would advise, if you choose to do something that extreme, to be very careful, because you are swinging weights in relatively small joints, which can result in injury. So you need to be careful when you're doing things like that.
Another thing to consider is actually, if you get like a bow staff or something with a weight at the end, you could actually mimic that exact same movement. This kind of forces you to use your entire body to throw that middle block in there as well. So this, you could even start walking with it. That exact same movement you could do on a resistance band, right? So I'm pulling with this side, and I do an inward out motion with my hand. And with the band, you could actually get used to leaning back into it, because it's kind of like you're trying to pull with your body weight, right? So a lot of people tend to just stay here and try to use their arm to pull against this band, but this allows you literally to sit back into it. That helps you apply it in a real situation when you're actually trying to throw something here.
Okay, so we also like to incorporate some footwork drills, things that we can kind of rep out to kind of help increase stability in our legs. So if you have a band, and we're going to use this thing to model that, they sell different types of bands that are relatively light. You want something that's light because you want to be able to move in this thing. So if you have a band that you can put around your legs here, basically what we like to do is practice pivoting from our heels and moving our stance out, and then one way then the other. And this looks like it's not doing a whole lot, maybe, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase, I'm keeping this pretty straight and firm the whole entire time. And basically what I'm doing is I'm practicing bracing my legs all the way from my knee all the way down to my ankles and my feet, right? Because we have a lot of movements here in this kata where you're pivoting and swinging around, so you want to have pretty stable ankles, pretty stable feet, right? So you can go as far as even walking this way, spreading out, and that'll also help work your glutes and your hamstrings and that sort of thing too. One of the other things I like to mention in this kata is the idea of stomping at the end of your kick to further increase the idea of driving through an opponent. So in the beginning of the kata, we have that front snap where we then land and then rotate and do a Shuto Uke. And so if you're incorporating that into anything, like Michael said earlier, pivoting movements, rotating movements are more likely throws, things of that nature. If you want to think about it, you can't really throw by landing softly, gently, and then rotating your body, right? So generally speaking, when I do rep out front kicks in the air or what have you, I purposely imagine stepping. So if I'm just using Michael as like a frame of reference here, just so I have a point to go across. If I'm throwing my front kick here, I'm going to step hard beyond my goal, right? And I'm actually pushing my foot into the ground when I kick. And I'm practicing next, like sinking my body weight before I rotate around, right? And that helps center me if I'm coming here to break his posture and then rotate, kind of a deal. So you have to think when you're incorporating the katas the way we choose to incorporate these katas into movement, everything's kind of a grappling sense, a throwing sense, pivoting around, you know, kind of a deal. So you have to start thinking beyond just a kick, beyond just a punch.
If you want to turn that into a footwork drill, just kicking off the front leg, stomp, kick, stomp, kick, stomp. So you're always just going back and forth so you get the rep of that motion, that muscle memory in. So bag work drills, just imagine, as we always say before, break your katas into pieces and just drill them on the bag. So the first drill, as the kata shows, I crash into the bag, and on the way back, I throw a Hammerfist here. And if you want to follow up with that, you can always go that third movement in the kata, right? You can also drill getting that motion down at the same time. Your kick lands at the same time as your hands, right? Another thing you could use the bag for is imagine it as a heavy moving object rather than a thing to strike. So then you can actually frame your Shuto Ukes, move around it, right? So then you're actually working your footwork as you're working on your frame as well. Pass it to the other side. That way you're actually building some touch sensitivity with your frame and not just hitting the bag as hard as you can. Another thing that's cool is actually working your motion of your left arm going outward, right? One thing here is it's going to be kind of difficult to try to hit something like this, so you kind of modify it and go with your knuckles, right? Here. It kind of gives you the rationale why some styles actually block outward rather than turning their wrist all the way. Because this is not a very strong structure to go out, but this might be a better one. Another one, the high blocks at the end, when you go down block, high block, you can actually rep that out too. And the kata actually shows a walk with it, right? So you can actually start driving in with your block, or that rising motion of your arm. So partner drills you can do, it's exactly the same as solo drills, right? But now you have a person that can give you progressive resistance, tone it down, give you different looks. Of course, partner drills are more beneficial since you can actually manipulate different variables. So the first thing we're gonna do is actually work on this rising motion, even this rising motion of the arms. All I'm gonna do for Aaron is be a human dummy. We've showed these drills before, but I'm just gonna be like this, giving him like 0.5% resistance so that he can get the muscle memory of just moving my limbs out of the way with a rising motion of his arm. So it looks something like this. And every time he does it, I reset. That way he gets as many repetitions of that same motion as he can. A lot of times people kind of mess up their practice by doing it once and then going to something else like a spar, right? So you want to think of each individual drill as developing individual skills, and therefore you want to create as many options of repetition as possible. Of course, as you dial up the intensity, you might only get a few repetitions rather than 10 or 20. So as I increase the intensity, what I'm gonna do is, instead of just resetting after every one, after he rises one, I'm just gonna keep pushing down and continuously dig down on top of him. That way he is forced to do this every single time. So I start off at here, he rises up, I start pushing down. Notice how it gets a little more continuous as we do this. He's still getting the reps that he needs in, but now it feels more alive. And of course, none of this is scripted, right? So the idea is that you're not doing a drill that you think the opponent is going to do. You're doing a drill and actually building a muscle memory that is more real. So now that drill is from a distance. Imagine that exact same thing from the clinch range, right? So now instead of being out here and shooting in, we're gonna be flowing like this, and he's still gonna have to be forced to do that. You notice how our stances change, our postures change, because the range is different. You're gonna have to learn to use your body weight as you're within the clinch. Notice how he has to grip more. That way he's manipulating my limbs and tugging and pulling them around rather than just striking them from below. So another partner drill you can do is actually to work the touch sensitivity of the frame. Same, very similar to what we did on the heavy bag, but now we actually have a person to work with. So all I'm gonna do is have my frame on Aaron's neck, and he's just gonna move his neck up and down, side to side, and I'm gonna have to adjust and feel where he is. If he collapses my structure, I gotta figure out a way to rebuild that structure and come back to the Shuto Uke formation, right? So you can imagine this as like the level 1 type of variation of this drill. Level 2, I switch to the other side whenever I feel it's advantageous, right? So we get to here. If I feel like he's really pushing into me, I need to switch and reframe before he gets close to before he closes the distance again, right? So we're here. And notice how I'm still only using my front arm. What you can do is add another variant to this where your offhand is actually controlling another part of his body. And it really looks like the kata, right? So what's cool about that, as I frame here, this thing's actually going to control where his body's going to go too. Because as he pushes into me, I can start lifting. Or maybe he comes from underneath, so I can start dropping as well. You notice all these scooping motions happen within the kata. So one on the neck, one around the elbow is like, kind of like the feeler of where his body's going to go. So we're going to do the exact same drill. He goes in, and I'm just readjusting according to him. Notice how this is a very active hand. So now we can have different responses to that, right? So let's say I have the frame here, and Aaron gets this hand and knocks my frame off. That's kind of, you could call that response number 1. His response to this is to knock it off. Boom. My response to him knocking it off is to reframe as quickly as I can. So now you can call that as adding different variables into the same drill. So we're here, we're doing this. I'm focused on him not closing the distance. Every now and then he's gonna knock my elbow off. So I gotta readjust, and I'm still building those frames, rebuilding the frame that we just had. So we're here, now we're just adding another variable to the equation. Now what if he knocked it off so much that I have to rebuild on the other side? So you can imagine how you can just create unlimited variations of the same drill. So we were here, he knocks off the elbow and he comes in, so I gotta figure out a way to rebuild on the other side. And then we do it again on this side. He knocks it off, I gotta figure out a way to rebuild. My feeler's here. So we're just doing this over and over and over again. Now imagine if I just did this and turned it to here. Now we drill that bottom, the last part of the kata, right? Instead of going here and being nice, I start doing this and lifting him up. He does the same thing, right? So this has to start driving up the frame. what's cool about that one is it's kind of obvious that it feels like a strike to the throat, that second one, right? So when we're here and he knocks it off slowly, I need to drive this one up to reframe. And it kind of forces you to sink from going down and rise up to your opponent.
All right, so we're also going to practice doing this movement right here in the back. So that we kind of interpret that as an arm drag kind of a sequence there. So I'm actually going to practice it by pulling it here and reaping this way, kind of a deal, right? So that movement is as much as possible, two things at once. Pretty sure some people have seen this here, punch, and then this kind of goes over. Doesn't necessarily have to be exactly like that, right? A better way, a more active way to actually practice that is to actually just do an arm drag like this, but have Michael give me some resistance, right? So we can play about this, and Michael can move me around a little bit, and I can practice doing this, right? Kind of a deal. So all I'm doing really is finding a place to move, pivot, so I can work around right here, right? I'm not going to continue on too far past that. But what it does well, because somebody puts a hand on you, you can do this, and you even have that side step or that crossover step to help shuffle your body more quickly out of the way.
Notice how right when he arm drags, his body weight sinks down to the ground, right? So we talked about before the idea of anchoring and then dead weighting your weight. So as Aaron grabs here, I anchor myself to him, make sure he doesn't let go, right? So then once I start grabbing here, I'm not just gonna try to pull with my arm, I'm gonna dead weight my body and try to rotate and try to attach him to my entire body weight as I drop. So again, you can see how many infinite number of ways you can add on to this. So let's say we add some white noise into this drill. White noise is what we call excess variables that aren't really important, right? So Aaron's goal is to get that arm drag. He gets the arm drag on me. My job as his uke is to give him some white noise. So I'm gonna start punching him, give him some things to think about while his same goal is still trying to get back. So I'm here, I'm tugging him around like I'm showing you. Throw the punch, good. We can even get to the point where I'm trying to go for something like a takedown, right? So if you guys don't know how to do a takedown, just pretend like you're tackling his waist with your shoulder. That's as basic of a takedown as you can get. So as I come from here, I'm gonna push him and try to come into this. He's gonna back away and get that arm drag, right? So we're gonna add the two together. I throw punches, I try for a takedown. He backs away and throws that arm drag, that Pinan Shodan motion. So Pinan Shodan applications, we're gonna try to steer away from things that kind of are obvious or have been around on YouTube or online for a while, and try to give you guys an insight into some other interpretations. Not better, not worse, just different, right? So this motion here, if you imagine your fists are closed the entire time, whenever we say that, either we're punching someone or we're grabbed onto something, right? And also from here, I'm actually sliding to my right as my arms go to my left. So whenever I see that, I see opposite directions. Most likely it's a throw or a takedown. So you could say, as I slide to my right and I swing to my left, most likely it's something like that, where it's a trip of the foot with the swing of the upper body. You don't mind if I take you down? Now, if I did this, I can actually continue the swing because you can see your hands actually going in a circle again, right? So as I take him down, I'm doing this, and then my hand actually turns this way to complete the takedown. So it's actually here, and what's funny is because this goes right to that, right? Which is another takedown. So if I complete the motion on Aaron, it goes like here. Big swing and drop, right? Big swing and drop. So essentially, you're swinging him over your leg with the rotation, with the upper body rotation.
Yeah, so then second part, or second pattern is here we have this kick to the Shuto Uke. So if you're applying it as the one unit, right? So there, here, and then Michael's the attacker, right? We have this thing coming in. Whether it's kicking to push out here or actually striking him, it doesn't really matter to me. My main goal is just push, and then I'm gonna drive this way, right? That's what's going on here. That still ends up, you're doing this thing, just coming in here, push, kick, and then when I complete the movement, same thing's coming down, right? My hands are just swinging down in one motion, right? If I'm gripping onto them here, whatever I've got a hold of, and it pulls them down, basically my hands end up in the same thing, right?
So after the series of Shuto Ukes, there's a Nukite here that is followed by a rotation, right? Nukites generally aren't striking soft tissue as much as cool as that sounds.
Do you mean it's not ripping out my heart from my chest?
It's not going through his body.
Dude.
But if you imagine it as going into tight crevices, so his hands are up here, and I have to go through this space, it makes sense for me to actually flatten my hand as much as I can and then step through, right? That's actually what's happening here. And that follows through with a rotation. And like we just said, rotation or throws. So you could make this work a couple ways. You can rotate and just pull them down to the floor, which is kind of like this. I step through and rotate. I pull it down that way. But anytime you have your hand on someone's waist, is a potential for you to load them onto your hip. So as I step through, I can actually rotate and lift and drop them to the floor as well. And what's funny with that is it actually ends up in a similar pseudo Shuto Uke type of hand motion, right? So we're here, as I lift, kind of goes straight down.
So we already kind of covered whole idea of using this thing is the arm drag, right? And you have the punch kick sequence after that. At the very end, we have this movement, reinforced block. But if I'm thinking, like the way I tend to use katas and stuff like that, is I'm basically trying to drive through my opponent the whole entire time. At least that's what I'm visualizing. So after we end the sequence and we come here and then we punch this way, we're gonna drive over the top. So I'm thinking I've already landed here, and basically if I'm doing it correctly, then my body's gonna land way past the center line. And this movement, instead of being a reinforced block, is basically like a reinforced push, right? Where I'm just shoving them down that way, over my leg, kind of a deal. And that can be as clean or as dirty as you want. If you turn it over, you're kind of like striking and pushing, right, at the same time. If you landed so close that you're here, and your punch lands this close, then this is like you're pushing and punching, right? And then now I have a hold of his body as well, kind of a thing. So, with all these movements, when we're doing them, we're also thinking, after every punch or shitoke or anything that we're doing, we're gripping onto whatever we can. Right, so a lot of times when we're thinking about like what things could be, it's like Michael said, my hand's closed. I must be grabbing something, or I must be shoving something with my fist, punching something, striking something all the time. So.
Another application you could think of is if he throws around a front snap kick here. If I'm able to catch this and just shovel him backwards, it should potentially make him fall straight down as well. You could just play with that posture, right? So even if I have this underhook here, I'm able to shovel him this way. Or something we drilled last week when he roundhouses here and I shove him this way, right? It's that same position of the arm. You're creating a U shape, meaning there's something hooked in there. And this one's controlling as well, so you're grabbed onto something as you're shoveling. So one thing for that down block, high block motion, the second time as you turn to the other way, anytime my hands are up and I start turning behind me, most likely I'm hooked onto something, right? So if I have a down block and a high block here, and then when I turn, I hook, and it actually goes into a down block to the other side, right? So I down block here, and it's funny because my hand actually naturally wants to rise up to make him continue his rotation. So if I do that again, down block, step, high block, down block, step, high block, right? So these are just some interpretations, a grappling-based, grappling-centric interpretation of Pinan Shodan. Doesn't mean it's the right one, doesn't mean it's the wrong one. Again, it's just how you want to see the kata, how do you want to make it yours, right? With that said, let's try to do a little sparring session with Pinan Shodan, and then we'll discuss like what techniques we kind of gravitate towards within the kata, and I think that'll be it. So we'll spar at like 20-30%, just so you can see how the techniques themselves manifest as the battle goes on, right? And we're specifically working with Pinan Shodan. So you can see how we were trying to use those techniques. Sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't, but the idea is just try, right? And through repetition, it'll come out. Most of the time, people kind of just do katas, drill it with a partner, and then put sparring gear on and start hopping around.
Right.
And do point sparring for some reason. There's this huge disconnect between the two, right? And I don't know where that came from. Maybe it just came from the sports scene, like big drive for competition. But the katas are here for a reason. Katas can be used in combat. It's just how much are you willing to drill to make it work?
Yeah, you can't make it work just by doing it once or doing it in the air. Nothing works that way, nothing. So going in and saying like, well, I did it 50 times, and why doesn't it come out? Well, did you do it against any resistance?
Right.
Did you do it against an opponent? Did you visualize it, how that would work against somebody? And that visualization, did it ever change?
Right.
Because it should, right? Like if you actively visualize something, like I can think about 100 times that I would kick somebody in the stomach, and every time the response would be different, right? It would be like, well, if I front kick somebody in the gut, what happens? It succeeds and they bend over, and then I can hit him in the head. Or it fails because I didn't do it hard enough, or they're too strong and they stuff my kick. So what do I do? What's the next response, right? Like if all you ever have is like, well, I did the round block and it worked. It's like, okay, well, I guess you know everything, or like, it just doesn't. You have to go beyond that kind of thought process, right?
And another drill to help manifest that, we showed it before, but not in this video, is that one person be like a compliant partner and the other person repping out kata movements on that person, right? So, and that compliant partner doesn't mean he's just like a limp fish, right? You can have compliance up to 90%, 100% resistance, and the compliance is he's not striking you back, right? So it's not an actual fight, but you're actually gonna have to work to make the techniques work. And that's something too. As you work harder to make the techniques come out, those techniques are gonna change and look different than the kata themselves. because it's very hard to keep your posture straight like you do in a kata when there's somebody pushing against you, you know, you're pulling your head down. But that doesn't mean that that movement isn't the same movement from the kata. It's just, it has to evolve to fit the situation at hand. So Pinan Shodan, or in any kata in particular, can always, eventually will always form to your own karate, right? Over time, karate becomes yours. We always say that. It becomes very individualized. So Pinan Shodan, what jumps out to me is the nukete towards the middle of the kata. That happens a lot in the close range. Another thing that works a lot is a Hammerfist. Aaron's really good at the Hammerfist, even dropping from the top or from the side like the kata shows. And all those takedowns that we showed earlier, they happen all the time, and they're takedowns that don't take a lot of effort because you're actually blasting through the person with your body weight, and then your hands are kind of just guiding them to the ground. A lot of throws that you see on videos and stuff like that, it takes tons of strength, as much as they say it's all technique, it takes a lot of torque and a lot of pull to get that person off the ground first before you can fit underneath them and throw them over, right? Whereas most of the throws that you see that we showed today, we're literally driving through your opponent with your body, with your mass, and then your arms are kind of just there to just guide their body weight to whatever direction you want. So those are very efficient throws. Those are the things that kind of pop out for me for Pinan Shodan.
I mean, I would agree. Like for me, it's pretty much the same thing. Like Michael said, I like using the Hammerfist. That nukete for the back take, that happens a lot. Like I specifically visualize that anytime I try to like reach for like an underhook or something like that. Like that's what I'm thinking when I do it. The framing with the Shuto Ukes, a lot, that happens a lot in a grip fight, when you're spinning around somebody or somebody's spinning around you. And like Michael said, all the throws that are in there are they're pretty easy throws to accomplish because, you know, like you said, you're blasting through your opponent, and your arms are basically guiding them. You know, your body's rotating as it's guiding them, right? So it's just kind of spinning them into the ground versus, you know, doing something that's specifically judo and trying to pick somebody up off the ground. You know, it's hard to pick somebody up who's outweighs you if you're like, you know, even 180 or 200 pounds or 150 pounds and somebody outweighs you by 10, 15, 20 pounds. It's hard to just pick somebody up. It's not an easy thing. So yeah, those things jump out to me a lot. And, you know, as far as the katas, when I think about them, like generally, it's always a visualization of like mauling somebody. That's what I always visualize. I tend to guess I roll like that also, but that's what I visualize because that's what fights tend to be. You know, if I visualize I'm trying to win a fight, like it's not a marathon, it's a sprint, and I need to be first, right? So my katas, I visualize them like that. Like it looks like kind of semi sloppy and gritty because like that's what fights tend to look like, you know. And so everything's punching and grabbing and punching at the same time or in between, and throwing wherever I can, right? Because if I can get them on their back, then I'm in the advantage, you know, kind of a deal. So and that kata's full. All the katas are really full of just that kind of stuff, you know, attack. I mean, they always say those things are like to receive, but it's like I'm receiving to attack you, right? So it's just in my hand, it's like in my head I'm not receiving your body, but I'm receiving your arm in order for me to attack it, right? That's all those things are kind of like tell me anyways as far as the katas are concerned.
Well, cool. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for your support. If you're watching this, that means you paid some money for it, so we appreciate that. Every little bit helps. And we also got a little demo of our dojo. We just opened up here in San Antonio, Texas. So if you're ever in town, shoot us a message and we'll accommodate you. We're here to train. So we're here to bring back practical karate. And these DVDs, we hope it helps that mission.
Yeah, and you know, constructive criticism is always appreciated. You know, so if you ever have any feedback or anything else you want to see or any questions, you know, always feel free to drop a line. You know.
Peace.